Late one evening, I found myself in an unexpected and rather private moment, unaware of the laughter and curious eyes around me. The cause of their amusement was not my awkward position, but rather a shocking personal revelation that I was the last to discover. They found it especially entertaining that I was completely clueless about the situation unfolding around me. How could a man be unaware that his wife was cheating on him right under his nose? Colin Wilson, who claimed to have closeness with my wife, was recounting to his friend Ben Kramer how he picked up her at a party last week. It was during this conversation that I was summoned to investigate a break-in at a local art gallery. Although I was away for only about 2 hours, I returned before the evening was over. I found my wife at a table with 3 other individuals, including Colin Wilson and his boss, along with their respective spouses. My name is Brian Sexton, and I work as an insurance investigator for a renowned insurance company that specializes in high-value property clients, likely unfamiliar to most. I entered this profession straight out of college and have remained with them for over 15 years. At 37 years old, I'm in the prime of my life. My role involves investigating incidents that may result in substantial compensation claims, primarily thefts and robberies, occasionally handling car accidents involving more than 1 or 2 of our vehicles. I'm highly skilled at what I do and have established a solid reputation in my industry. I'm often contracted out to other companies, albeit at a premium. While I may need to travel frequently, it's never for an extended period. If a lengthy investigation is necessary, I have personnel who can remain on site to complete the task. I've been married to Allison for 14 years, and we have 2 wonderful children, Regina, aged 10, and Christina, aged 8. Allison, who is a year older than me, also works at the same company as the personal secretary to Bill Quinn, the company president. Although we married before she joined the company, I encouraged her to apply for a position after she lost her previous job. Although hiring her required HR approval due to nepotism policies, they consented because of my standing within the company. Fortunately, Bill Quinn was seeking a new secretary, and Allison's extensive experience as a personal assistant at a major corporation made her an ideal candidate. After interviewing her, he immediately offered her the position as his personal secretary. The individuals I mentioned earlier, Colin Wilson and Ben Kramer, are insurance specialists who cater to large companies or individuals with significant assets. While they're not close friends, they work under Jerry Scogins, a mutual acquaintance who is also a good friend of mine. I primarily report to Bill Quinn and operate independently, though occasionally Jerry assigns me interesting tasks. I overheard a conversation a week after the party. I'd stepped into the restroom to relax for a bit when Colleen and Ben entered, seemingly disregarding the closed stall door, and began discussing the party. Colin began boasting to Ben about his recent conquest, prompting me to feel a tale of escalating discomfort in my gut, unrelated to typical cramps or sweat induced by bad fish. Ben asked Colin how he managed to seduce her, expressing surprise as he never pegged her as that type of woman. Colin explained that they did a bit of dancing and she seemed quite friendly, but when he suggested going to his office, she mentioned Brian wouldn't appreciate it. So Colin convinced her to join him for a drink at the bar. Colin went on to describe how, while Brian was occupied dancing with Judy, his secretary, he approached the bartender for a double shot and subtly swapped their drinks while Judy was engrossed in conversation. His intention was to help Judy relax so he could make advances on the dance floor. Ben questioned what Colin's plan was, considering Brian's presence, but Colin insisted he hadn't orchestrated Brian's departure, chalking it up to sheer luck. During the dance, Brian informed Judy he needed to leave briefly. Though Judy suggested he take her home first, Brian urged her to stay and have fun, promising a swift return. Although Judy wasn't thrilled, she complied, staying behind with Colin, Jerry, and his wife. Later, Colin ordered Judy another drink, secretly asking Joe to make it a double again without Judy noticing. As they continued dancing, Judy became increasingly intoxicated, clinging to Colin as he made advances. She responded with giggles and pressed against him several times. Colin thought that a few more drinks would increase his chances, so he got her another, which she quickly consumed. Unbeknownst to Judy, it was another double, and she started feeling woozy. Colin suggested they step outside for some fresh air, and Judy readily agreed. They ended up settling in the back seat of his car. She was almost unconscious, so he slid his hand under her skirt. She didn't appear to object, and even pleaded for more. He complied, and she seemed to enjoy it. He found the experience incredible. Colin expressed disbelief that Allison would engage in such behavior, considering she never seemed like someone who would cheat on her husband or be attracted to someone like him. He assured his companion that the events were genuine, mentioning a scheduled date with Allison the following Saturday when she typically went to the salon. They planned to meet and book a hotel room for the day. Colin's companion expressed envy, acknowledging Allison's attractiveness and wondering what Brian did to deserve her. He even hinted at the possibility of being introduced to Allison after Colin was finished with her. Colin responded with a non-committal perhaps and emphasized the importance of keeping their conversation confidential to avoid any complications. They both left the restroom, leaving the ME struggling to comprehend what they had heard. I couldn't believe what I'd just heard. Was this really happening? I started to recall that evening. It was almost 11 when I returned to the party, finding Allison seated with Colin, Julie, and Jerry Scogins. Allison didn't seem intoxicated when I joined them, chatting with Julie about the kids. Colin exchanged a few words with me, but left after a few minutes. I noticed Allison saying something to him, but I didn't think much of it. The only odd thing about that night was when we got home, Allison wanted to make love. While not entirely unusual, she typically wasn't in the mood this late. She was particularly passionate that night. Guilt. Regret. About a week elapsed after the party, and I noticed no change in Allison or her demeanor. She never mentioned my early departure from the party, or what occurred in my absence. When I inquired, she claimed to have danced with Colin and Jerry, but mostly observed. She and Julie discussed school and the kids' play, and that was all. She expressed a preference for coming home when I left, suggesting I needed to keep a closer eye on her. "Hey, hun, any plans for this Saturday? I was thinking of playing golf, if that's all right." I watched her closely for her reaction. "This Saturday, right after lunch. I'll be at the salon. It'll take me an hour, maybe an hour and a half." "Where are you headed?" "To the golf course." "So, is she really going to the salon? How does Colleen know about this if she hasn't told him? I didn't know about this either." It all felt uncomfortably real. "I'm thinking the country club. I'll see if Ben Kramer wants to join." "I think he and Jerry are idiots, don't they?" "I'm not sure. I know Jerry is, but I don't know Ben or his wife well enough to say." "Same here. Hey, what about Colin Wilson? You spoke to him at the party, right? He might want to come along?" Allison turned and gave me an odd look, pausing before responding. "Why would you want him to come? He's, pardon my language, an idiot. I had to dance with him a few times at a party, and he really creeped me out. He's still an idiot." Now I'm wondering, is she trying to dissuade me from inviting him, or is she trying to convince me she dislikes him? Either way, it's unusual for her to speak about someone like that. "Oh, I don't know much about him, but he's Ben's friend and they seem close. Maybe it's not a good idea. I'll just call Phil and Charlie. They're always up for a round." "That sounds like a better plan." "Stay clear of Colin. You don't want any trouble, all right?" "He's off my list now." "So, you're okay with golf?" "I'm fine with it, as long as I'll still be absent. How about dinner at the Cypress Inn restaurant afterward? I'll have a fresh haircut and you can unwind. After golf, you can take me out and show me off. I'll drop Chrissy and Jean off at my parents'." I agreed, and we arranged to meet at home at 5:30 on Saturday to prepare. If I had been more cautious, I could have gathered enough evidence to confront her that day. It would have been fitting to lay it all out over dinner at one of the city's finest spots. The next day at work, I headed to the control room to gather some gear for tracking my wife and her lover. I decided to take one of the company's surveillance vans, leaving it in the lot until Saturday morning when I went golfing. I grabbed 2 small transmitters for her purse and car, and a GPS unit for her vehicle. It would pinpoint her exact location at any time. The van was equipped with video capabilities, but I wasn't sure how to utilize it. Since Colin mentioned a motel, filming was out of the question. Perhaps I could conceal a camera in her jacket, but only if I knew she'd wear it. I could try, but it was uncertain. With the GPS unit, I could track her movements, tapping into its signal with the van's equipment. It had local street maps, pinpointing her location within 30 meters. The audio transmitters would capture any conversations recorded within the van. All of this can be automated, so I don't even need to be present in the van. I just need to leave it about a mile away from where she was last week. My plan was to spend the rest of the week observing. I'm quite skilled at this since it's my profession. I observed Ben and Colin, but didn't notice anything unusual. Normally, I visit my wife at least once a day, but lately I've been visiting a bit more frequently. Although I hadn't seen anything suspicious yet, I decided to gather information from Ben. He explained that he was working on policies for a large factory complex, and I used to spend some time examining the site and developing contingency plans for potential disasters. This is known as risk analysis, and is part of the risk insurance process. On a particular Tuesday, I approached his desk, which was across from Colleen. He seemed deeply engrossed in his work. I greeted him and expressed my desire to review the Baxter plant plan for the day. Initially, he appeared distracted until he understood my request, after which he simply nodded and agreed, stating he was available anytime. I still needed to return to that location to take some photos. We discussed the timing, agreeing to go in about an hour. It was decided that my colleague would stop by my desk on their way. After a brief exchange, I turned the corner and noticed a smirk exchanged between Ben and Colin. They maintained their gaze on me until I was out of sight. They were intriguing individuals. I resolved that Ben would face consequences for his actions. Although he wasn't directly involved, he colluded with Colin and made disparaging remarks about my wife. He was aware of the plan and chose to witness Colin's deception, rendering him equally responsible in my perspective. An hour later, Ben arrived as arranged, and we departed in my SUV. I discreetly installed one of the small transmitters in the car console, which could record any conversation within or near the vehicle. My intention was to have a record of our private conversation. As we left the parking lot and began the 25-minute journey to Baxter, I started the conversation. I asked Ben if he had enjoyed the party from the previous week. He responded that he hadn't been present, explaining that he was away on a trip and had missed out on the festivities. I conveyed to Ben my interest in understanding what had caught his attention, particularly in light of Colin's betrayal involving my wife. I asked if that was what he had overlooked. Ben seemed taken aback by my straightforwardness and initially struggled to respond. He made a move towards the door handle, but then composed himself and met my gaze. He confessed to only knowing what Colin had relayed to him and expressed doubt about the accuracy of the information. He pondered whether Colin would invent such a narrative. I expressed skepticism about Colin fabricating such a story, but pressed Ben on how he had come to know about the situation, given his absence during the events. I mentioned hearing about his 2-hour absence, coinciding with the incidents in question. Colin had mentioned getting her intoxicated and taking her to his car. It seemed that Colin didn't have any further plans to meet up beyond what he had disclosed. Ben seemed hesitant as he recounted Colin's words, acknowledging that he was unsure about the truthfulness of the information. I sarcastically remarked on Ben's apparent loyalty and thanked him for his supposed friendship, insinuating that he was bound to inform me regardless of his intentions. Ben expressed reluctance, stating that he wouldn't wish such a situation upon me, and apologized for making me feel like a fool. He referenced Colin's claim about not being able to resist my wife. After Colleen's statement, I turned off the recorder, intending to keep our subsequent conversation off the record. I reassured Ben that as long as he followed my instructions, he would be fine, but warned him of dire consequences if he failed to comply. Ben simply nodded in agreement. Additionally, I hinted at one more matter I wished to discuss with Ben. I made it clear to Ben that Colin must remain unaware of our conversation and that he must not disclose anything to him. I emphasized the consequences of any breach of trust, including the possibility of Ben losing his job and his reputation being damaged. I reminded him that I had means of monitoring both him and Colin to detect any indiscretions. I assured Ben that I wouldn't speak to Colin or even engage with him, instructing him to continue as usual and let Colin do the talking without any interference, even if he agreed with him. Having learned the truth, I instructed Ben to heed my warnings, assuring him that everything would be fine if he followed my instructions. After that, we didn't exchange many words, spending the next 2 hours in silence. Ben fulfilled his role, and I fulfilled mine, obtaining the information I needed while ensuring Ben remained unaware for the time being. It wasn't necessary for him to know at that moment. The week felt unusually long, with me keeping a close watch on my wife, although she didn't display any unusual behavior. Wednesday evening arrived and the children went to their dance class, scheduled to conclude around 9:30. I sat in the living room watching TV when Allison joined me, settling onto my lap. She wrapped her arms around my neck, pressing her cheek against mine. We've got about 2 hours before I need to pick up the kids. How about we make love? Despite feeling disheartened and frustrated about the situation, I was human after all. Against my better judgment, I felt myself getting aroused. I embraced her tightly, kissing her tenderly. Take me upstairs to our bedroom right now. I want you, and I want it now. I needed no further encouragement and followed her upstairs, admiring her figure along the way. We undressed and then engaged in passionate lovemaking. Afterwards, we lay in each other's arms for a while, content to bask in the afterglow without the need for words. It was love at its finest. For a moment, I pushed aside my doubts and fears that this might all come crashing down. I wanted to believe it was all a lie. But reality had a way of asserting itself. That was wonderful, darling. I think we need to do this more often, don't you? We've been out of sync for a while. Let's not allow that to happen again. Agreed. I'll make sure of it. How much time do we have? And do we have a moment for a quick shower? I have to pick up the kids after 9, but we can postpone if you like. Now, or should we wait until our date on Saturday night? I could ask the kids to stay at their mom's for the night. How about this? I'm all yours for the evening. Anything else planned for Saturday? Okay, you've got golf, and I've got a hair appointment. Then, my love, we have our dinner date. And afterward, I'm all yours whenever you desire. And I expect plenty of that from you. Any better offers now? None at all. Okay then, we're set. Allison quickly dressed and went to fetch the children. I lay there for a while, reflecting on what had just transpired. How could that woman be close with me like that if she slept with that awful Colin Wilson? I knew she was clever, but was she also a skilled actress? Something seemed off, and I was determined to uncover the truth on Saturday. While she was away, I checked the transmitters and confirmed they were working properly. My plan was to install them in her car on Friday night, and also on Percy. I had everything prepared except for one last meeting with Ben Kramer. I needed to know which hotel Colin had reserved. Ben would find out for me, or else I'd resort to less pleasant methods. The following morning, I phoned Ben and arranged to meet him in the third-floor cafeteria. He agreed, without question, and upon his arrival, I was already seated at a table. He joined me silently, and I wasted no time getting to the point. Ben, old pal, I need you to find out from Colin where he intends to take Allison on Saturday. I need the motel's name and location. Just catch him alone and inquire. Tell him you suspect he's deceiving you, and that you'll trust him if he reveals the truth. I flashed a grin at Ben, who pondered how he'd manage my request. Fear of my reprisal weighed heavily on him. Eventually he relented, but inquired how I'd verify if he disclosed the meeting place. I assured him not to worry, I had my methods. As he departed, I embraced him, discreetly placing one of the transmitters beneath his jacket collar as a reminder of our deal. He was so intimidated that he remained oblivious, the transmitter almost imperceptible, secured with glue. Upon returning to my office, I activated the receiver and heard Ben's return to his desk, along with his conversation with Colin. Ben invited Colin to meet him in the copy room in 10 minutes, which Colin agreed to. Ben then questioned Colin about potential marital issues, to which Colin defensively claimed everything was fine and mentioned seeing me on set the day before, apparently doing well. Doubting Colin's words, Ben pressed him about his plans with my wife for Saturday, specifically mentioning a motel. Colin insisted on his truthfulness and offered to provide proof if necessary. Colin then disclosed that he had booked a room at the Skyview Motel on Statler Street for Saturday night, with check-in at 2 p.m. and my wife arriving by 2:15 p.m. He even suggested verifying his reservation by calling the motel. After confirming the details, Colin made a remark about my wife's marriage to me and warned Ben about meddling in their affair. Despite Ben's concern, Colin remained indifferent, suggesting that if my wife was interested, so was he. I shut off the receiver after this exchange, almost inclined to believe Colin's claims. However, I hoped he would backtrack and admit to fabricating everything, which he didn't. Instead, he confirmed the details, leaving me unsettled. Nonetheless, I now had the motel address to set up the necessary equipment in the van for surveillance. I contemplated parking the van there on Friday night, activating the gear on Saturday noon, and keeping my distance to avoid witnessing my wife's betrayal. Feeling adrift, All I could do was move forward and gather evidence to confront my wife, Colin, and Ben. First, I rang the motel, and they confirmed Colin's booking. At least that part was true. Now, I just had to bide my time until Friday evening. Then an idea struck me. What if I captured them entering the motel room on camera? I resolved to visit the motel that day and explore my options. Inside the Skyview Motel office, I awaited the clerk. He seemed shady, which suited my purposes. Honesty wasn't what I needed right now. "Hello, friend. I'm an investigator for an insurance company and I need some information. I have an ID and a warrant for you," I said, swiftly flashing my badge and presenting a convincing document that resembled a search warrant. It was a forgery, but I counted on his lack of astuteness and susceptibility to deception. The slip of cash I offered didn't hurt either. "Yes, sure. What do you need?" he replied. I asked him to confirm Colin Wilson's reservation and if he had a room number. He replied in the negative, so I suggested he assign a room on the first floor overlooking Statler Street. He hesitated until I slipped him an extra $50, finally divulging a room number suitable for my filming purposes. I informed him about the van I'd park on his property, to which he shrugged and dismissed as inconsequential. I thanked him once more for his assistance and slipped him another $50 for his discretion. A sly grin crept across his face as he pocketed the bills. After I departed, I realized I could capture the footage I desired by positioning the camera through the front window of the van, parked directly outside their room. Now I'm all set. Friday at work proved challenging for me. Unsure of what to do with myself, I made my way to Bill Quinn's office, using the excuse of discussing a recent art gallery robbery, although he didn't really need the details. My true motive was to catch a glimpse of my wife. As I traversed the hallway, her face brightened upon spotting me. She waved eagerly, gesturing for me to join her at her table, and I obliged. "I've been enjoying seeing more of you lately. Not complaining, but what's changed? Anything I should know about?" she inquired. "Nothing like that from what I know. I just enjoy being around you more," I replied. "Is Bill in?" "He is. Want me to introduce you?" she offered. "Yes, if possible. I need to discuss some matters regarding the art gallery," I explained. Entering Bill's office, I engaged in conversation with him. Despite his youthfulness for a president, I knew he had garnered a strong reputation. He had spearheaded the launch and operation of various ventures, including the site I worked on, and held a substantial stake in the company. Bill had a stunning wife named Naomi, whom I'd met on several occasions. She epitomized the quintessential trophy wife, blonde, slender, irresistibly attractive. She and Allison were of similar ages and often conversed, while Bill and I had developed a close rapport. During our discussion, I directly asked Bill his opinion on Colin Wilson. As part of my duties, I regularly provided feedback on other employees' performance at Bill's behest, though this matter concerned me personally. "Why the interest in Colin? Is there something I should be aware of?" Bill inquired. "I need to ensure any potential issues with my team members are addressed promptly," I explained. "Well, I might have some concerns about Colin. I'm not particularly fond of him, and Ben, I might have more to share with you this weekend. If things go as anticipated, I'd like to touch base with you at home on Sunday if that works for you. Otherwise, we'll reconvene on Monday," Bill disclosed. "Let's wait and see. Until then, please keep this between us," I requested. "Agreed. No problem. I trust your judgment in these matters. You've always been fair in your evaluations, and I value that. However, I'd like you to consider accepting the vice president position I proposed as you requested. I haven't broached the subject with Allison yet, but she deserves to know. If you don't inform her soon, I will. I'm just waiting for the right moment. This entails significant changes for us, so I wanted some time to deliberate. I'll give you an update next week," Bill suggested. "Sounds good. I'll definitely consider it. I've been weighing my options lately, so I'll need to make a decision soon," I assured him. With my own agenda in mind, I exited Bill's office, exchanging a few words with Allison before heading toward Ben. Pausing at his desk, I made a comment loud enough for Colleen to overhear, affirming his assessment of Baxter's performance. Then, I subtly signaled to Ben that I'd overheard his conversation with Colin, prompting a surprised reaction from him, though neither of us spoke further. Patting him on the back, I discreetly removed the small transmitter, just as before, leaving him none the wiser. I wrapped up the day without any interruptions, and waited for Allison before heading home. I intended to inform her that I needed to drop off the van somewhere and would catch a taxi to my car, causing me to be a bit delayed. She bid me goodbye with a kiss and headed home. I noticed Colleen standing by the door, observing her departure. He glanced at me briefly before returning to his seat. Afterward, I parked the van, ensured the camera was positioned correctly to capture the designated room the clerk had assigned, and secured it. I reminded the motel owner that I needed to leave it there overnight, perhaps until the following day. Slipping him an extra $20, I thanked him for his cooperation. He pocketed the money and shook my hand. With that settled, I headed home. Friday night at home brought another surprise. Allison ordered pizza for the kids and arranged for them to spend the evening at Grandma's. When I inquired why, she explained that she enjoyed our Wednesday night so much that she wanted to continue the trend tonight. Did I mind? Not at all. Friday night unfolded similarly to Wednesday with a new twist. Although I found enjoyment in the experience, a sickening feeling crept over me as I pondered where she might have learned these new techniques. However, when I later questioned her about it, she giggled and retrieved a book from her nightstand, showing me an article about lovemaking after 35. Much of what we had been doing for the past 2 nights was outlined in that article. I found pleasure in our activities that night, striving to fulfill her desires. It took up most of the night, but I didn't mind. I resolved to take Viagra in the future. As we lay beside each other, I finally mustered the courage to inquire about the source of her newfound enthusiasm. Allison, I love what we've been doing and I want to please you, but I have to ask, where is all of this coming from? Why now? If I didn't trust you so much, I'd wonder if there might be a guilty conscience involved. Sorry, Bree. Naomi shared something with me last week that I can't repeat. I've been reflecting on our life together, and it fills me with happiness. Sometimes, I just need to express that joy. I chose this path to show you how much you mean to me. I listened, watching her happiness with a mixture of emotions. Yet, I couldn't shake the thought. If this is true, how could she be having an affair? Should I confront her? I'm glad you feel that way. Are you sure I make you happy enough? Are you satisfied with our closeness? Or do you feel something is missing, prompting these new endeavors? Please, be honest. I adore our closeness, and you've always fulfilled me completely. I have no desire for more, but I don't want us to fall into a routine where our passion fades into monotony. Can't you see? Don't you want me to always feel desired by you? You'll never have to worry about that. I love you and always will. I can't imagine anything jeopardizing what we have. That's reassuring because I won't allow it. We spent the remainder of the night wrapped in each other's arms, waking up the same way. Though pleasantly exhausted, I wanted to shower with Allison. I roused her and pulled her into the shower with me. Initially protesting, she eventually joined me under the water's spray, and we lovingly attended to each other's needs. Soon we both became aroused and pleasured each other. When I inquired, she mentioned she was ready for the day, but anticipated something more that night. With that, we finished our shower, got dressed early, and I drove to the motel to ensure everything was prepared. I programmed all the timers to activate at 1 p.m. and ensured the audio recording would last a minimum of 5 hours. The video footage was burned onto a DVD, a process that would take around 7 hours after compression. This would cover the entire day. I initiated the sequences and locked up the van. When these two lovers entered their sanctuary, they would become the stars of my new film, and the initial screening would make quite an impact on everyone involved. Returning home to grab my golf clubs and bid my beloved wife farewell, the day proved terrible regardless. I played golf with 2 acquaintances from the club, and if my performance was any indication, they likely believed my club membership was a waste of money. I ended up buying beer for all of us, feeling like a complete failure. Around 5, I drove to the van to ensure everything was in order. Scanning the area, I didn't spot any cars or activity, assuming everyone had already departed. Quickly calling my home phone, Allison answered, and I simply informed her I was on my way before hanging up. With the meeting time with Allison drawing near, I drove home without reviewing the collected information. I was eager to have it before dinner, but then I reconsidered our planned evening. Why not savor what she offered one last time? Despite the betrayal, I still enjoyed making love to her. However, I found myself choking up again. Why was she doing this to me? I loved her deeply, and the thought of living without her seemed unbearable. I knew that if the evidence on the surveillance tapes confirmed my suspicions, divorce would be inevitable. Though I loved her, Her behavior was unacceptable. But what about the children? She was a devoted mother and deserved custody. If she had indeed cheated, there must have been a reason unknown to me. She was fundamentally good, but had made a grave mistake. I could come to terms with that. She could care for the children, and I would provide child support. These thoughts consumed me as I drove home to reunite with my wife. Uncertain if I could endure the evening, I knew I had to try. Legal action couldn't be taken until I had concrete evidence. Yet, a small voice in the back of my mind persisted, casting doubt on all the information gathered thus far. I brushed it aside. Facts were facts, and soon I would have all the evidence I needed. At home, Allison had already showered and dressed, mentioning she would add the finishing touches when it was time to leave. Meanwhile, I hurried to get ready, ensuring we left on time to make our reservation. My wife was radiant, always drawing attention as we entered the room. She was accustomed to the admiring glances of men, which she effortlessly brushed off. Yet, I couldn't help but notice, and it always filled me with pride. Tonight served as a stark reminder of what could have transpired. Despite this, she remained intelligent and engaging, making for an excellent dinner companion. We conversed on various topics typical of spouses enjoying a night out, and she seemed to indulge in more wine than usual, given my role as the designated driver. It felt as though she was particularly flirtatious with me, her husband. As we concluded our dessert of chocolate mousse, preceded by sorbet, we exchanged smiles. Both of us were eager to retire to the bedroom upon returning home that evening. I signaled to the waiter for the bill as Allison excused herself to the restroom. Exiting hand in hand, we made our way to the car. As I navigated onto the main street towards our house, Allison leaned against my shoulder, intertwining our fingers. She gently moved my hand from the steering wheel to my lap, and without much prompting, I enveloped her in a hug reminiscent of our youthful love. She sighed contentedly, and we drove home in this love-making embrace. Once home, Allison busied herself with household tasks, until finally turning to me. "Shouldn't we head upstairs and pick up where we left off this morning? You owe me something, since you only gave me a down payment earlier, remember?" "I do. Lead the way and I'll follow." We ascended to the bedroom swiftly, where Allison stood before the bed. I stripped down to my boxers and socks while she removed her top and bra, leaving only a strand of pearls around her neck. As she reached to remove them, I halted her hand. "Leave them be. You look incredibly hot standing there with nothing but those pearls. You're stunningly beautiful. This is a sight only I will see. I am completely yours, and I want you to do as you please with me. I want this night to mark the beginning of a lifetime together. Are you certain is this what you desire? I wouldn't want to do anything to cause you pain or embarrassment. You should know that I trust you entirely and offer myself completely to you. I love you with all my heart." In that moment, I believed her, knowing that regardless of what I discovered the next day, I would never give up on her. I decided to postpone any further thoughts until tomorrow. Tonight, I would love this woman with all my heart. That night, we explored new realms of closeness, trying positions I never imagined and experiencing things I never thought possible. At times, she would laugh and cite a page number when I inquired about her fantasy, yet it was a magical night, a night where I learned to love conversation, giving and receiving in equal measure. What a night it was! We fell asleep in each other's arms, waking late Sunday morning. Reluctant to rise, she agreed to one more encore of our favorite moments from the night before. Afterwards, she had to pick up the girls for Sunday, and I mentioned the need to swiftly check on the van. She suggested she might stay at her mom's for a while before returning. This afforded me the opportunity to retrieve the tapes from the van and inspect their contents. I still had to check what I left in her purse and car, but that could wait. She departed, and I drove to the van, retrieving all the films and prints without issue before returning the van to the production facility. I called a taxi to pick me up and transport me back to my car, then headed home. The first step I took was to examine the GPS printout. She had confirmed her car's location on Statler Street, where the motel stood, and at that moment, my heart nearly ceased beating. Though I hoped against hope, it seemed my fears had materialized. Despite almost deciding not to proceed further, I felt compelled to view the video firsthand. I switched on the TV and DVD player, inserting the DVD, preparing myself for heartbreak. The image was crystal clear, the room perfectly centered on the screen. I fast-forwarded until I spotted a car approaching, then slowed to normal speed. Colin Wilson emerged from the car, opened the room's door, and disappeared inside. Rewinding, another car appeared, and I witnessed a woman approaching, knocking on the door, and being greeted by Colin's smile as she entered the room. When she turned, revealing her face, my heart raced, and my pulse skyrocketed. Pausing the video, I watched it from start to finish before removing it. Well, I'll be damned, I muttered to myself. I needed to contact Bill Quinn immediately. There was one address I had to verify, so I retrieved my wife's address book from my desk drawer. As anticipated, the address I sought was there, confirming my suspicions. A smile crept onto my face. With all the necessary information in hand, I dialed Bill's home number. Urging him to meet me immediately, he initially insisted I come to his house, but I persuaded him to meet me alone elsewhere. Eventually, we agreed to rendezvous at the TGIF restaurant near the office. An hour later, we met there. Allison and the girls had plans for dinner at her mom's, affording me the time I needed. At TGIF, I briefed Bill before revealing the DVD. I brought along a portable player with a 9-inch screen and headphones for privacy. As he listened, his anger simmered beneath the surface. Initially skeptical, he vehemently denied the possibility of Allison's involvement. However, as I played the recording of Ben's encounter with Colin and laid out the entire narrative, implicating both Ben and Colin, Bill's complexion turned crimson with rage. Despite his personal regard for Allison, he gradually accepted the truth. I advised him to watch the DVD before passing further judgment. As Bill viewed the footage, his countenance fell, evident pain etched across his face. Sensing his need for privacy, I looked away, allowing him to process. When he finished, he met my gaze, and I waited for his response. Once composed, I made my sole request. I want them both terminated for breaching the moral clause in their contracts, effective by Monday afternoon. With the evidence I've provided, you have the authority to act as you see fit. I won't mention this again. Bill's surprise shifted into a smile. It was reassuring to witness. I aim to involve him in this matter only as much as necessary. You have my word that this will be handled first thing Monday, and I'll personally escort them off the premises. They're dead to me. There may be further action I'll take, but it's best you don't know the details. Understood. Agreed. Following that, I handed him a bag containing all the surveillance data except for one small cassette, which I retained for my own purposes. It was necessary for my plans regarding my wife. Bill and I continued our discussion for another hour or so, making additional decisions to address later in the week. We parted ways with a handshake, and before I left, Bill addressed me once more. Brian, you're a good and honorable person. I appreciate what you've done and respect your actions in handling this matter. Things could have escalated if you were less level-headed. You have my gratitude and respect. I felt a sense of relief I hadn't experienced in some time as I headed home to my family, who remained unaware of the impending changes. That evening at home went smoothly and my spirits were high. Allison was curious about what had transpired, but I told her she'd learn more at work the next day. Exhausted from the previous nights, we retired early for a peaceful night's sleep. Allison wanted to be embraced, and I gladly obliged. We fell asleep in each other's arms. Just like the previous night, Monday at work was bustling with activity. Allison called me at 9:30 to update me on the situation. I pretended to be clueless and asked for details. She informed me that Bill had summoned Ben Kramer and Colin Wilson to his office immediately. They were currently present and tensions were high. I professed confusion and requested further updates. 20 minutes later, Allison called again, reporting that Bill had instructed her to contact security urgently. She discreetly handled the call at her desk before informing me that Bill had directed security to escort Ben and Colin back to their workstations. She hastily ended the call, promising to update me later. An hour passed, with no word until Allison finally phoned to reveal that both Ben and Colin had been terminated, with Bill requesting her to draft disciplinary letters citing a breach of the morals clause. She was exhilarated, deeming it the most unusual event during her tenure as Bill's secretary. She insisted we grab lunch together to discuss it, and I agreed. Over lunch, Allison recounted the events of the morning in detail. She described the escorting of Ben and Colin out of the building and the warning to never return. She mentioned Bill's evident agitation, even recounting a moment when he momentarily snapped at her before apologizing. Eventually, she turned to me, seeking insight. How would I know about this? Bill instructed me to ask you. When I pressed him, he simply said, "Ask Brian, he's aware of everything and opened my eyes to a lot. So, spill it. Before I divulge anything, I want you to listen to this tape first." I handed her a cassette of Ben and Colin's conversation about the motel. She listened intently, her expression turning pale as she reached the end. Removing her headphones indignantly, she exclaimed, "This is absurd. It's a lie. I never went to any motel with him, and I never would. You can't trust this recording. Did you show this to Bill? Does he believe this nonsense too? No, he doesn't believe Colin, and neither do I. I have something to explain, and I expect you to listen attentively without interruption." When I expressed skepticism about the tape, Allison eased slightly, though she remained angry and somewhat apprehensive. She nodded for me to continue. "I overheard Ben and Colin talking about a week ago," I began. "Colin boasted to Ben about an encounter between you and him at a party. He claimed he got you intoxicated and then took you to his car, where you engaged in lovemaking activity in the back seat. He provided explicit details of the incident to Ben, who seemed convinced by his account. In fact, Ben was so impressed that he wanted to be involved in the next rendezvous." Confused, I sought confirmation of the truth. Allison attempted to interject, but I persisted, needing to uncover the reality swiftly before it escalated. I instructed Ben to confront Colin, who admitted to booking a motel room on Statler Street for Saturday afternoon, coinciding with your supposed hair appointment, I continued. This raised alarms, as I couldn't understand how he knew about your hair appointment unless you had informed him. Remember, I mentioned our plans for Saturday evening to you? Despite this, he never showed up. Determined to verify your involvement, I utilized a company's surveillance van to monitor your car and record anyone entering the motel room. After obtaining the room number from the receptionist, I arranged to review the footage on Sunday. Subsequently, I contacted Bill and provided him with all the evidence, resulting in Ben and Colin's termination at my behest. As I recounted the events to Allison, she remained bewildered and adamantly denied being at the motel with Colin. "But I wasn't with him. I was at the salon as I told you," she protested. "My salon is indeed on Statler Street, but I had no knowledge of any motel rendezvous. You don't believe me. I know who he was with because she confessed it to me herself." Cutting her off, I pressed on, needing to reassure her of my trust. "I don't believe that, but I trust you implicitly," I affirmed. "Let me explain. I received footage of Colin's encounter that day, and indeed a woman visited him as he claimed. This woman was none other than Bill's wife, Naomi. My suspicions were initially aroused after a conversation with Jerry Scogins a few days prior. When Colin alleged he took you to his car that night, I inquired with Jerry if you were intoxicated. He chuckled, revealing that you and his wife had only consumed soft drinks that evening and were inseparable. He even mentioned how you asked her to remain by your side to deter Colin from asking her to dance, indicating your lack of interest in him. When I asked if Colin ever suggested stepping outside for some air, Jerry simply laughed, implying he had nothing to say. So did you truly doubt me? Did you orchestrate this surveillance to spy on me? I'm troubled by this lack of trust, especially after our evenings together on Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. Of course, I believed in you, but Colin's fabrication left me with doubts. I suspected he was diverting Ben's attention away from his true companion. Uncertain of her identity, I had to uncover the truth, though I wish it hadn't implicated Bill's wife. He was utterly devastated. We conversed further before reluctantly returning from our lunch break. Allison accepted my explanation regarding my inquiry into Colin's companion, and I left her to her thoughts. Though I harbored some doubts, I felt no regret in uncovering the truth. Our relationship was now stable, and I was determined to maintain that. Work had settled by then, but Allison informed me that Bill requested to speak with her. Later that evening, I mentioned that I was unaware of the details, and she seemed to believe me. I received no further updates until we sat down for dinner at home. Amidst the girls' usual flurry of activities, we found a moment of peace, during which Allison shared Bill's conversation with her. He spoke about the importance of having a husband like you, emphasizing trust, respect, and love, and the devastation of losing it all, she recounted. Then he confided in me about Naomi's actions and sought my counsel. And what advice did you offer him? Were you able to assist? I refrained from dictating his actions. Instead, I encouraged him to reflect on his love for Naomi and consider forgiveness, if feasible. I urged him to engage in a candid conversation with her, but also cautioned against prolonging the decision if reconciliation seemed improbable. He seemed receptive to my words, so perhaps I made a difference. I'm certain you did. Did he mention anything about me? No, nothing further. Is there something else on your mind? Well, yes, Bill extended an offer for me to assume the role of Vice President of Investigations for the corporation. It entails overseeing all investigators worldwide and offers the flexibility to choose our place of residence, potentially in California or Florida. Although I would still report to Bill, this would come with substantial financial rewards and benefits, including shares. Allison's excitement was palpable as she leaped into my arms, overwhelmed with joy. When did this happen? Is it in recognition of your actions today? Is it a sort of reward? She exclaimed. Now, who's doubting whom? Bill proposed this to me 6 months ago, but I wasn't ready to consider it until now. The prospect of losing everything I've built made the decision more tangible. Last week I feared I might have lost you, and it prompted me to reevaluate, I explained. Brian, you could never lose me like that. I won't stray ever. It's out of the question, and you mustn't think otherwise. Do you understand? Never again, she affirmed, holding me tightly.